Hello, welcome to this video. And this video was going to be my critique of the Brits. Now, the Brits are the British equivalents of the Grammys. So they used to be a big deal, 30, 40 years ago. Old Jarvis Cocker, showed his bum when Michael Jackson got above himself and portrayed himself as Jesus Christ, all that bit. EMF bringing extreme noise terror on to upset everybody. Prince arriving and taking over the show. Remember all that of the Brits. But it's gone down in rock folklore, possibly for when Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac and Samantha Fox presented it, because they did a very, very bad job. And then on top of that, it was like the most weirdest teaming of two people together. It sort of does go together in a really strange way. I think because they're so opposites. Samantha Fox was let's say a glamour model, a legendary glamour model from the 1980s, who, I'm just going to get my coffee, it's going a bit cold now, a legendary glamour model that I do believe later on actually worked with Hawkwind. Yes, you see, I can bring the prog in anywhere. And she's about 4'3" or something, and then Mick Fleetwood's obviously about 6'10", and so them stood next to. I mean, that's the first thing I think of with the Brits. It's not particularly, a big deal really when you think about it, but the media make it a big deal. Award shows, okay, are usually set up by some organisation that wants to create some sort of purchase into whatever industry it wants to get a purchase into. So, for example, say you wanted to break into the toothpaste industry, for example. So you could set yourself up and you could have the toothpaste awards, which means you've got to hire a hotel lobby thing and hotel, extra room, whatever. And then you've got to announce it, get all your socials up, and then you're going to say the National Toothpaste Awards, and here are the nominations: best toothbrush, best toothpaste, greatest smile, all these things you come up with, and then you send those invites out to people. And even though anybody with a brain knows that any sort of award means absolutely nothing, they are still chuffed when they get the thing. I got voted into, in 2001, I got voted into Rhythm Magazine's best sort of drum clinicians. I came 10th in the thing, and I was ever so chuffed. And I knew deep down that when they'd done this poll, that the main person, they would have had a bunch of people voting for it. I think that was a public vote. And the public vote would have, the main person is who they vote for. And then the next person, so the main person gets like 40%, the next one gets 20%. Once you get down to 10, you're really dealing with my mom and some of the blokes in the band I was in at the time. That's what you're dealing with. I knew that. I knew I'd got probably 4 votes to get on that list, and yet it was like a big deal for me because I got in the magazine. I've been voted. It still goes on my CV now. So these sorts of awards, they mean nothing, but when people get the award, they're chuffed, right? The really famous ones who were above it, they're not so much chuffed, So then they'll do their thank you on video. I can't really be asked, but I'll thank them on video. And they'll be able to show that they're above it, because it's all about status. So then, you don't have to pay for these people to come. They're going to come on their own. And in the media industry, the pop music industry, film industry, you could actually film it. And this is why the red carpet bit and all that bit is more important than the actual awards show itself. It's a way of you getting loads of people in, which create a whole ton of stink in the media. You don't have to pay for them. And then they can all pat themselves on the back, all virtue signal. And so these awards have become, obviously a marketing campaign for whatever industry they're trying to market it for. Now, the Brits will be, it's a thing that has gained purchase into the industry, and now the Brits is a sort of registered trademark, I suppose. There'll be all sorts of things coming off that, like the Brits Academy and all this type of stuff, and that's what this is about, right? Now, in the golden age of rock music, of course, and it's quite incredible because I was watching one of the Grammy Awards from a few years back, and it was for Best Song. And they had these lists of songs come out. One was by Elton John, and then the next one was like by Stevie Wonder. And it was just ridiculous. And in the end, it was Olivia Newton-John that won. Came out this video. I can't remember many more details about it with that. But the point is now, when I watch something like the Brits, because I did sit down to try and watch it, but I found it so annoying, I just couldn't stomach it. So I have watched a highlights thing, but the highlights didn't tell you anything because it was so predictable. I mean, there's nothing in there. I know Charlie XCX won a few awards. Of course she did, because everyone thinks she made the best album last year. The greatest musician on the planet is Charlie XCX or Sabrina Carter, right? And that's what's being pushed. And Sabrina Carter was up there. Of course, she had virtually nothing on, because this is what women have to do nowadays to be, featured in the industry or look like a weirdo, like Miss Havisham gone wrong. That's what you have to look at. Who's that? Chapel Row or something? Of course she won. I mean, you can predict it. And I don't even know who these people are. You can predict it. Okay, so I really wanted to come on here and do a critique of the Brits. Right, so I can't really. Because it's not worth my time, it's not worth your time, it's not worth anybody's time, and nobody seemed to mention it. This is the thing. Usually there's something that happens on one of these award shows. I mean, when like the Oscars meant nothing, and the Oscars are going down and down and nobody cares anymore, and then they're all virtue signaling and they're trying to do this and do that, and you can't make a film unless you've got this many like sort of identity groups in it, and all that's kicking off, right? And no one's interested in it anymore. None of the films are any good now. I mean, the film industry is going the same way as the music industry now. It's taken longer because they were able to monetize streaming much better than the music industry ever did. Much better. Their model's much better. But now people can't even be asked with that, because ridiculously cheap content like this is beating Marvels. I love it. I can sit here in the freezing cold with a cup of coffee, right, with very little preparation, just chatting into my iPhone, and I'll bang it up later on. I mean, some of my videos take bloody ages to do, and it really kills me, but nobody watches those. But these ones, it's the few people who watch this and go, what Andy's got to say about the Brits, but I think even when I had the idea of doing it, because I didn't do the Grammys, and of course, the Grammys had one thing that was worthwhile, and that was Kanye West with his bare wife. That's the thing. And a few years back, the Academy Awards, you had Will Smith hitting Chris Rock. It's worth having an award ceremony if something like that happens in it. It's worth having. What happened in the Brits? There's nothing happened. And you know why nothing happened? Because the music industry now, especially in this country, has just dribbled down to such a sort of elite of certain people who are playing a certain game, and none of them are going to rock the boat, right? None of them are going to come in and do anything that the elites don't like doing. They're too well trained. I mean, all these people went to private school, and in the UK, private school's like being in the army, so they've been trained, to turn up and be polite and do the right things. Now, within that world, you can be outrageous, but you have to be outrageous within that world, All us proles, the Great Wash, we sit there just looking on, and people can't be arsed with it anymore. And what's really interesting about it is that as this sort of leftist identitarian, what people use the word woke, I hate that word, but I'm just using that to identify that thing, because the people who endorse that thing will never let you name it, because they want to be like Voldemort, where you can't say what it is. And so every time you try and name that thing, they go, well, what is this? It doesn't exist. Like this. Anyway, so that end of the world, right? It's like they're sat. They're sat on the top of a mountain where they were king for so long. They had so much control over the narrative of culture for so many years, that they've sat there, like, telling us what we can say and what we can't say, and what we can think and how we should examine things. And they always talk about we should be working towards eradicating toxic masculinity because it feeds the white supremacy. They've been telling us all that, and even those who didn't believe it, right, still had to couch everything we did in those terms for them. But that tide is rising. If you can have a tide rising up a mountain, which I don't think you can, because I think if you've got a tide rising up a mountain, that's technically an island. But if you can imagine the metaphor, and the water's rising, and they're all stuck on the top. And where is that? Well, last week it was the Brit Awards. They're all there, aren't they? They're all there walking around, cracking jokes, doing stuff that none of us get anymore. All right? Now, I'm going to segue into another thing here. Because there's a lot of random ideas going on here in my head at the moment. So, Tom Morello. I was thinking, if you had to have, we've got Robert Plant, Jimi Hendrix, we've got these rock gods. Who would be the virtue-signaling identitarian rock god? It's got to be Tom Morello, hasn't it? It's got to be Tom Morello. I mean, Tom Morello is not a great guitar player in reality. He had a band, because he's a much older than you think Tom Morello is. I mean, the bloke's in his 60s now. And when he emerged in the mid-90s with Rage Against the Machine, he was actually a lot older than the rest of them, because he'd been in this other band before, and they were like a really bad Red Hot Chili Peppers. And in that group, he plays much more normal guitar solos. He can play a little bit fast, but what is apparent to my ears is he has not got a musical ear in that respect. It doesn't sound that great. I've always known this with Tom Morello, but I didn't want to say it because he does achieve something really great with Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine were a fantastic band, and I love them. And Tom Morello, once he stopped trying to play like normal guitar and started to emulate a turntable, on his guitar, and started to go and all that stuff. So it's bloody brilliant. We love it all, right? And he had a different image. He's mixed race. I think his dad was African, and his mom was not. She was some sort of socialist thing and all that bit. And he was brought up in that sort of socialist right on world. He went to university. He did very well, and this in this country, we call these types champagne socialists, right? And I feel that Tom Morello is the very best example of this you can get. He really is a champagne socialist, Tom Morello is. He says all the right things, he does all the right things, but he also sees himself as being part of an elite. That elite isn't based upon money or wealth, although he is very, very wealthy, right? But it's based upon the fact that he's right. He is championing the right cause, and he's always in the right place doing the right thing. And that's what Rage Against the Machine is all about. I think Zach De La Rocca or whatever, it's the same thing with him. They don't push people, but they're a certain type of elite. They're an elite that has come up through a sort of progressive, political, educated, socialist, a critically aware group, and they've been brought up like this. They go to university, they get educated, they're usually financially okay. Now in Tom Morello's case, and I've got to pull this out of my brain because I didn't know I'd be talking about it. I thought I'd be talking about the Brits because I just pulled him at the top of my head, thinking who really represents this? Tom Morello. But anyway, I think his dad was a politician, and I think then they had to leave, and the mom came to, I think, New York or somewhere like that, and had to bring him up as a single parent and all that type of stuff. But I think at a certain age he moved to a sort of quite normal town, and he was like the only mixed race kid in there, which didn't seem to cause him any harm because he went all the way through, and he went to, I think was it Harvard? He had a great, nothing affected him, and he went through, he came out, he went to Los Angeles, he formed in a band, everything went his way, the band eventually went massive, he became a multimillionaire out of it, and all that type of stuff, and good on him for doing it. I don't begrudge him it one bit. But the thing with Tom Morello, and I went from thinking he was great, because I really do like Rage Against the Machine, but I turned on him when a few years back, he was out with some friends and he goes down to some sort of restaurant and the restaurant's full. So he goes, can I come in? And they went, no, it's full. And when they wouldn't let him in, he started to play the "Do you know who I am" card, right? Fair enough, he's a rock star, is what you expect, right? And they said, still, you're not coming in, okay? And then this is the champagne socialist bit. I've actually got the quote here. You're thinking, how's Andy got the quote here when he hasn't prepared this? He just said he hasn't prepared this. I'll tell you why. Because I have been working on another top 5 people that get on my nerves. So I've got my big computer here with all the stuff on. I hadn't planned on putting Tom in this video, right? This is why I do know a little bit about it, but that's what I'm saying. I have to pull it out of my head because I wasn't ready to do this one. So where are you, Tom? Okay, so he doesn't get in, right? So he then goes home, and with his huge following, because he's a big star, famous star, very, privileged person, he then he put this. It's called the 5 Point Restaurant, and it's in Seattle. And he tweets this: the 5 Point Restaurant in Seattle is the worst, super rude and anti-worker. Shittiest doorman in the Northwest, prick, spread the word. Now, all of that I can live with. I believe in free speech. We don't like it, right? I could say he's wrong, but I got nothing against that except the anti-worker bit. Why is that restaurant an anti-worker? And why did he say it? The reason is because these types, right, they try and get their way, right? They try and control the narrative by pushing that. They get in there every single time. They will find something. And in this case, he said they were anti-worker. And the restaurant responded and said, we are totally pro-worker. We try to pay more than any other small restaurant. And on top of that, high pay, we offer health insurance, paid sick days, paid time off. But the thing is, that's not the point, Now, of course, pro Tom Morellos will go, yeah, but he did answer back with a much more reasoned response. Of course he did, because it did not work. And this is the point I want to make. Recently, culturally, this stuff has stopped working. And the reason why it stopped working is because some people are just going, I can't be arsed playing this game anymore, right? And that is what I felt watching the Brits. Not that I was thinking that, because I've been thinking like that for a number of years, but that was the feeling it got, that the whole world was just sort of going, unless you were like 15 years old, but, normal people are watching that and go, whatever, and the celebrity clash, you feel like they just don't matter. People are just going, whatever. And what they don't understand is because they have gone from being our entertainers, right, and being superstars, and actually, before the social networking internet world, we would not know what they thought, right? And actually, in the classic era of the 1970s, their political opinion actually didn't matter, and they could be the most awful fascists, but we didn't care because we just bought the albums. They didn't have to go and, do Live Aid and go into the Amazon rainforest and save them, or, do some charity thing for, dogs with no legs, or whatever it is that these types do now, to show that they're decent people and assuage their guilt for being so well off. They didn't have to do that. All I had to do was smash hotels rooms up, take loads of drugs, and then make decent albums, right? And although that's not morally the right thing, aesthetically, when you step back at it, I'd rather have the good albums than have, bland pop stars that had just been created by the industry, that had just sort of been involved with some sound that resembles music. So it's been created by a producer somewhere who's probably about 50 years old, and he's just basically there hunting, chasing trends, right? And they stand there over the top, and because they're related to someone in the industry, or they got a ton of money and they're quite attractive and they don't mind showing a bit of flesh in the ladies, case, then, they are then pushed to become absolute superstars. And then, of course, when the award ceremony comes round, it's like, well, just give Charlie X the X one. And of course, when she got up and said it, she said, I'm championing all the other people. I'm on this side of all the underprivileged. I'm on the side of this. And, you know, and it's that rock and roll otherness. It's the freaks and weirdos that rock and roll used to represent, right? That has become a commodity. The whole thing has been commodified, if that's a word, or commodified. Is that the right word? And I don't know. The whole thing absolutely stinks, really stinks, and we need to move away from it. And the best way to move away from it, right now, you know, I'm quite political, but contrary to a lot of people's popular belief, I watch as much left-wing speakers as right-wing speakers, but you have to be selective with left-wing speakers because most of them are idiots, but a lot of them aren't. And here in the UK, we have an extremely left-wing media group on the internet called the Vara Media, and they have been discussing, as the Young Turks have, they have been discussing very intelligently the idea that identity politics has not been a winner for them. The tide is turning, right? The tide is turning. And what the real problem with all this is that we are watching an elite that are controlling the narrative. The visible elite are just they're just the front end of a much bigger elite that are controlling everything. Now, if you think I sound like a conspiracy theorist with this, I noticed this when I taught in colleges, because when I was into college, if something bad happened, we would have a meeting and then we would decide what we were going to tell the students. Right, we weren't necessarily going to tell them the truth, but we were going to tell the students something that would control them, right? And I thought, if we're doing this because we're in charge of this college, or we're in charge of this course, if we're doing this in this way, then this goes right up. And it's layers and layers of people trying to control it. Just like if you did something wrong, if any of us do something wrong, if you do something wrong in your car and you get cut up, then someone pulls you over and they said, "What the hell are you doing? Pull at me." You go, "But you weren't indicating." And you have that big row, don't you? You have that big row with them because you've got to prove that you're right. It's a saintly thing to go, I think you were right, and I apologise immensely. I have done this to people in these situations, and they go, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm really apologise. I think you're right. It's my fault, isn't it? I shouldn't have done it." But, "Oh, yeah, don't worry about it." And then everything smooths over. It's all like this. It's all about seeing the other person's point of view. And what struck me is this morning when I got up, I saw a video by James Baldwin, the great, American thinker, writer. And he said that the best thing you can do with your day is spend some time to put yourself in someone else's shoes. That also went into my brain. And then when I was dropping my daughter off at school this morning, she turned around and says, "Dad, have you ever thought of what it's like to be in someone else's shoes?" And this lady came out of the hospital, quite an old lady, she's walking across. And we started to talk about what it was like for her. And the empathy kicks in, the absolute empathy kicks in. Now, the reason why I didn't actually watch the Brit Awards is, of course, this weekend, something else happened, didn't it? And that's what we were watching. And it was the meeting between Zelensky and JD Vance and Trump. And I being so focused on politics, I saw that meeting when it first came out. So I watched it from the beginning, almost live. It had just been posted. I watched the whole 50-minute thing and I saw what went on. And I went, "Oh my God, that's a real example of how horrible that situation is in Ukraine. Terrible situation they've got there. What can you do? How do you stop it?" And it had sparked off. Then, a few hours later, I get on social media and everybody's in the UK. I don't think it's happening in the US, but in the UK, people are going to go, "Trump was rude, he was terrible, this is terrible." And I get in the car this morning and the radio is on and it's all you're hearing. I'm thinking, I'm in the UK, right? And the only thing anyone is talking about now is the Ukraine. That's all the media's talking about. A few weeks ago, it was the Pakistani grooming gangs, wasn't it? That's all anyone was talking about. That's forgotten now. Now we're on to this, and then we'll go on to something else. The media's like this, going back and forth. And within that, this narrative is coming down to us, right? And I spotted this. So I then go on to the social media and I basically said this. I said, whatever happens, we need to be on the side of the peacemakers. No, you're totally wrong. Why you shouldn't be like that? We've got to support Ukraine. You've got to fight there. Putin's evil. Trump's evil. They're all evil. You don't understand. You've got to fight with Ukraine. Right? So I go, yeah. But it was the best thing here. Do you remember John Lennon? You know, all we are saying is give peace a chance. You remember all that? All you need is love. Right? Anything that stops that war is what should happen. And I'm saying this to these people that are just blowing up at me and getting so angry because I'm saying this, right? And the reason is because underlying it, I was saying Putin, we need to be more friendly with Putin because I could sort of understand how he's acted in the way he has. His invasion and what he's done there is absolutely awful. There's killing and violence going on. But we are not in control of that. We are not the police of them, right? This is the trouble with different nations. So we have to stop, okay? If it was the First World War and then you were locked in that trench warfare and, you know, and thousands of very young men, some of them who had no interest in being there, were being slaughtered day after day. And someone says, yeah, but we've got to keep going because we don't like the Russians and they've done this. So I'm sure they could list all sorts of things that they've done, right? But I'm very aware of what the sort of Azov brigade, the sort of Nazi end of the Ukrainian army, has done as well in terms of atrocities. I don't want to get into a game of who's done the worst atrocities. I just want it to stop. And I'm very aware for it to stop, certain things have to happen. First, Zelensky has to get to a point where he wants a ceasefire. And he doesn't at the moment. He wants to keep on fighting. Now, there's a whole political reason why I think that is. But you've got to remember, he is getting billions and billions coming into his country. I don't know how much he's worth at the moment. But of course, I am now downplaying Saint Zelensky, aren't I? I'm saying, well, why is he doing this for? Why does he keep fighting for? If we fight and fight and fight and fight and fight, at the end, we will have beaten the Russians back. What we're going to do, we're going to keep going. But what will happen is the reason why America wants to be there, the reason why America's been destabilizing that region for the last 30 years, the reason why America changed the regime is so that they can put their missiles in. And if they put their missiles in, they're pointing at Putin. All right. And if something kicks off, those missiles will decapitate him before he can come back. And that's the game that's going on here. Now, the answer that after loads of trying to get a peace agreement, and you have to understand Putin wrote up a peace agreement between him and Ukraine, right? And this is all based upon, in 1990, James Baker going there and promising to the Russians that there would be no expansion of NATO up to that point, right? Now, loads of people watching this will be getting very, very angry with me now for saying this because they have been trained to think one-dimensionally. And they are thinking that if I'm saying this, right, it's equivalent of me criticising the British's bombing of Dresden, right, and saying that is a terrible thing that went on then, which means then I must be on the side of the Nazis. It's not like that. The Russians are bad as well, but we should not be trying to fight this war. We should be trying to stop it. And so the Western liberal democracies should be trying to mediate a peace, which means bringing Putin to the table and Zelensky realising that that drain of money that was only coming in for a whole bunch of dodgy reasons that for me are morally as dodgy, although probably not as destructive as what's Putin done, but morally worse. And so what I think is when I look at it, I think this is not black and white. This is not a simple situation. This is not that there's a goodies and baddies, right? This is what the media told us for the whole of the 20th century, that there's goodies and baddies. And what happens is because people are trained like this, they look round for the baddies. And because the elites are controlling the narrative, right, they go, they're the baddies. Now, you've got to understand why our media is pointing at Trump and going, that's Hitler, that's the baddie. Look how bad he was. Why are they saying it about Trump for? All right? He could be Satan incarnate. I mean, Stalin virtually was in the war. And yet we did a deal with Stalin to beat the Nazis. And we, the British, did a deal with America that basically destroyed this country financially. And the debt that we owed them financially wasn't paid off until about 10, 15 years ago. It's an incredible fact. That is what's going to happen here, right? And Trump actually saying, "Oh, I'll have your minerals instead," is a deal. Is a very good deal. And the reason why it's a good deal for Zelensky is because once they agree that, America has to protect their interests. But also morally, do we really want to be fishing out lithium from the Congo with those child slave death camps? I mean, this is all so complex. I didn't mean to talk about this, but that's why I'm not watching the Brits. And the reason why I brought this all up is because that is where my head has been at over the weekend. And I don't know if you feel like this, but music just does not seem to be keeping up with it. There is no voice that is truly saying stuff that annoys the man, that annoys the elites. There is nothing out there saying that. There's nobody. What you have is a bunch of elites crowing and virtue signalling how wonderful and great they are to themselves, while we all just sit and go, "Oh God," you know. And I feel my job is here is to talk about musical aspects. I'm a musician. Look, I've got a drum kit behind me. That proves that. So I can talk about music aspects. But the more I talk about music, you have to clip the wings of virtuosity, because you can fall into that and think that the art's only getting any good because it's skillful. It's not. And when you start to pull back and look at music and art, when it's very powerful, it's a cultural impact it has. And a lot of the time, the truly political music is actually apolitical, in that it changes people on a gut level. And it's usually because the art form suddenly opens its doors to welcoming voices that weren't welcome before. And that means the elites hearing something being told them that they didn't want to hear. In the 1960s, that was opening up the world to the voices of black people, gay people, trans people, Jewish people, women, all those groups that have been sort of pushed down. We opened up the doors, right? But the thing is, they all said different things. It wasn't what they were saying that counted. It was the fact they were saying it. It was the fact they were saying it. But they were all saying all sorts of different things. That's the point, right? We need other voices in the arts. We need something. The Brit Academy is never, ever going to give an award to anybody who does this. It probably is going on in the music world, but it's going on somewhere else. That's collapsing. They think it's still going. They really believe because they're in it that it's still going. They're saying, "Oh, so pleased that I've got a Brit award." Who gives a toss? Are you selling any records? How are you making your money? You know, it's like you don't matter anymore. This is the thing I'm trying to get across here, right? And the narrative that was coming off that meet, that was more important. That was the big cultural thing. And why was it the big cultural thing? Because now we don't need rock bands putting records out and you go and put them on, because we can go straight to the source now, and we can see live it's happening. Whenever in human history could you sit down and watch a political negotiation? Now, what shocked me is that it reminded me of something that happened at my college once. We used to have security on the doors, and that security would protect you from people coming in and doing nasty stuff, right? One day this nasty guy comes in and he's got a knife on him, and the security disable him. And I was there when they did it, and my jaw hit to the floor that trained people, security people, were terrifying, were fast moving, knew exactly how to handle it, and that it was like shock and awe. That bloke got out, you know. And what they were doing didn't hurt the guy, they didn't beat him up, they didn't do anything like that, but they were acting in an aggressive way and just doing things that seemed counterintuitive. And when I spoke to the security guys after, I said, "Yeah, we were just trying to get him to back up." And we got him to back up until he was out, right? Now, there were some middle-class lecturer types in that, you know, some, you know, middle-aged ladies who, you know, teach in the college. And they didn't like it and they complained against it. Now, I'm not saying this was the reason why that security man was sacked, but he was sacked a few weeks later. And I thought, my God, these middle-class types cannot cope with the negotiation required in that situation. In a high-powered situation, they can't deal with it. What we saw, due to this new art form that is right in front of us, this here, is we saw the negotiation before our very eyes. If they had gone in like the old days, and then we just had the cameras, had Zelensky walking out, and them saying, no, we didn't reach a deal, it would be a completely different thing. That's the important thing artistically here. That's the important thing. At one point, Zelensky muttered an obscenity, probably about J.D. Vance under his breath, right? Because of the internet, people were able to see that. They would be able to isolate it, and people who speak Ukrainian could see what he was saying, right? This is a new world we're entering into. All the art forms are going to die. Where's music going to be? Music's going to exist because the music's the best. Music is the best, remember. But it's going to have to operate in this new world we're in right now. And so, my review of the Brits is, don't watch it because it's not worth watching. It's not important. What the title of this video will be, I haven't got a clue. I'll come up with something clickbaity. I mean, I've got the Brits, awards are rubbish, modern music is rubbish, right? I've got Tom Morello is annoying, and I've got bloody Zelensky Trump. I mean, I should be getting 1 million views, right? Shouldn't I, on this one? You can see where I'm at, can't you? I've just got to get them all in, haven't I? Not in the thing. And I know this is the thing that's great. As soon as I come up with all that, right, and I put that up and the thumbnail comes up, everyone will bristle. Everyone will go, oh, what's Andy doing now? Why is he going to talk about this? Why can't he just talk about Genesis? Well, because I'm me. I've never been like that in my life. When I set this channel up and started talking about the best Genesis albums, right, this stuff naturally came out. I can't help it. This is the way I am. I identify as annoying. I hope you enjoyed this video. Come on, it's starting. We're not involved in it, us lot. You know, nobody hates anybody. I don't hate anybody. I don't think you hate anybody. None of us want a war. None of us want anyone to die. We're all sort of on the same side in the end. We're all on the same side, right? But the side we're on is like my students in my college, and I promise you, the people who run it are A, incompetent, and B, they're telling you a story. They're always telling you a story every single time, right? They've told me a story. Everything I could have just said that I've received, that, you know, my opinion on it, which is a bit counter to the mainstream in my country, but that could be a story, right? I offer it out there because there might be some bloody expert on this. What I think I've found with this Jeffrey Sachs, I shouldn't have been listening to him. He's too knowledgeable about all this. I spent my weekend listening to The Economist, Jeffrey Sachs, and I thought, well, what he says makes sense. But I don't know, maybe he's just spinning a line, you know. I don't know. None of us know. None of us know. We're just in the world receiving information. We do not know what the hell is going on. It's terrifying. Once you realise it, it's a very frightening thing. But how do you get round that? Well, I'll tell you how you get round that. If you're at the end of the video now and you watched it, we go, love you lot. You're the best. We're all together. We're all in this together, right? We can disagree, right? But if you disagree with someone, straight after, put your arms around them and say, come on, and do something else. Get out there and bloody be... Let's have different opinions and let's rejoice in it. Let's rejoice in it. The only way you can do that is by dropping that toxic bit of the identity politics thing, where if somebody has a different opinion, they have to die. They have to be cancelled. You have to be angry. You need to shout at them, right? You don't. Someone can have a different opinion, right? Their actions are different. If someone acts racist, they're bloody piece of trash, aren't they? No, but if they say something that doesn't follow your code and you think it's, you know, aggressive in some way, they're just saying stuff. It's a different thing to acting in a certain way, right? What do I know? I don't know anything. None of us do. I've spoken too long on this now. I'm going. Bye-bye, everybody.